This video is about the Oregon testimony for SB422 to legalize lane splitting in the year of 2023. Oregon got very close to legalizing lane splitting back in 2021. In fact, it passed both the House and the Senate, went to the governor's desk to be signed, and then it was vetoed with basically no warning or explanation. The governor gave a very short statement about concerns related to safety, and that was more or less it. I've extracted just the parts of the video where people are testifying. I'm going to go ahead and play them, and I'm going to have some commentary after a few of them.
In 2021, the Legislative Assembly passed Senate Bill 574, which would have created a conditional exemption to the violation of motorcycle or moped unlawful passing in a lane with a vehicle to allow lane splitting in certain circumstances, but the measure was vetoed by the governor. Similar to that bill, Senate Bill 422 would create a conditional exemption to the violation of motorcycle or moped unlawful passing in a lane with a vehicle.
Senator Dembrow is going to lead us off, and I know he will take a little bit longer than 2 minutes.
Maybe not, Mr. Chair.
All right.
So I'm Michael Dembrow. I'm the senator for District 23, which is much of Northeast and Southeast Portland. And Mr. Chair, Vice Chair Thatcher, colleagues, I'm really pleased to bring back to you this bill. As staff mentioned, this is essentially the same bill that passed 2 years ago with more than 2/3 votes in each chamber, but then was, without warning, vetoed by the governor before the session ended. We are bringing it back for the reasons that I'll explain. And I will say once again, we have a broad bipartisan group of sponsors of this bill. Again, what Senate Bill 422 does is it allows motorcyclists to move into another lane when traffic has come to a stop or has slowed to 10 miles per hour or less. It does not allow a motorcyclist to move into a lane occupied by a car traveling at higher speeds. If they were to do so, that would be a Class A violation under this bill, thanks to an amendment that you will see before you. Colleagues, the purpose of Senate Bill 422 is to increase safety for motorcyclists, allowing them to avoid deadly situations in which they could be rear-ended or sandwiched between cars. You'll hear more about that from the people who follow me, as well as from the many, many pieces of written testimony that are on OLIS. You'll also hear about the other states that have adopted this policy in recent years. Colleagues, I know there are people who are concerned that even under the narrow circumstances of Senate Bill 422, lane sharing could potentially make our roads more dangerous. I would encourage them to look at the experience of those states that have enacted such policies, particularly Utah, which has had the most experience. We are not seeing evidence of increased danger. And that's why we're bringing this bill back again for your consideration. I urge an aye vote. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Jana Jarvis on behalf of the Oregon Trucking Association. I've participated in work group discussions around this issue in the past. I've testified against these issues to allow lane splitting in Oregon in past legislative sessions, primarily because safety ought to be our primary concern. While Senate Bill 422, sorry, I can't type, defines specific conditions that allow this practice, the practical reality is that it will only increase the incidence of motorcycles lane splitting in general traffic conditions. This allows it when the traffic is going slower than 10 miles an hour with motorcycles traveling at speeds of 10 miles plus, so up to 20 miles an hour. But this is unenforceable if you think about it. And one of the things I would encourage you to do is I will file my written testimony tonight, and it will have a YouTube link in it where a motorcyclist is lane splitting and talking about the bill being vetoed, and he is lane splitting up to 45 or 50 miles an hour and talking about that's about as fast as he likes to go when he does it. So I just want you to watch that and see it. And then I want you to think about traveling around large commercial trucks like that. Few drivers understand the blind spots around a large vehicle. Our CDL drivers are trained to try to compensate for those blind spots, but lane splitting on the right side of a large truck is an extremely dangerous practice. And even worse when you're lane splitting between two semi-trucks, which I have personally witnessed when I was down in the Los Angeles area. I held my breath for a good minute as I watched that. Drivers changing lanes or reacting to road conditions could easily lead to serious accidents or fatalities for motorcyclists splitting that space around their truck. We have to think about the fact that Oregon is the nexus between Washington and California. We move more goods over our road network than we produce in this state. However, we have smaller road capacity, and so there's going to be incidences where motorcyclists are splitting lanes between trucks because you've got trucks in both lanes on the road, in the right lane and in the center lane. I understand my time is up. I would ask you to read my testimony tonight and let you know that we're very strongly concerned about this practice. Thank you.
All right. So to be clear, this woman is part of the trucker lobby. I find her statements about safety to be incredibly hollow because to me it seems very clear from her testimony there isn't actually a lot of concern for the motorcycle riders themselves. That's kind of that's the lens they put it through because they don't want to sound selfish. The real reason, which I think becomes very clear as you hear her talk about her concerns, is she is concerned about the liability of her truckers. An interesting stat I found was that if you look at the driving records for people who were involved in fatal accidents and you look at what citations they got, motorcyclists were more likely to have drunk driving, speeding, and suspended license. But they were actually less likely to be involved in a fatal accident than a trucker. All of her comments about it being scary and dangerous, I mean, they just don't hold water. I'm going to go ahead and insert a little bit of video here where you're going to see, and I'm going to show you what it looks like to lane split right next to trucks. And again, I think it's so important to remember lane splitting is legal in California right now. You have to realize, again, they're not concerned about motorcycles. They are only concerned about their own liability, and they're not even really concerned about the intellectual honesty of the arguments they're making. They're simply trying to fearmonger. That's the goal. So here's some video of me lane splitting, and you'll see that I am going past trucks. And again, I don't know what is scary or terrifying for the rider or the truck driver in this scenario. It is extremely simple. And if I felt unsafe at any point, I would simply stop and pull back into traffic. That's the best part about splitting. It is a optional tactic. It is not a requirement.
Chair Brzezinski, members of the committee, my name is Jonas Akers. I'm a motorcycle rider from up in Aloha, and full disclosure, I am the significantly less famous and accomplished brother of Senator Gelser Bluen. I'd like to ask your support once again to protect Oregon motorcyclists. You obviously saw this bill in 2021. We received an excellent summary of it just now. I won't go over that again. Senate Bill 422 presents a very modest and elegant solution to a real problem. It was developed by examining the data. UC Berkeley conducted one of the largest studies on motorcycle safety in history, specifically on this subject. Researchers discovered that motorcyclists experience far fewer fatalities or severe injuries when they are traveling between lanes of traffic. For instance, the frequency of head injuries dropped 47% in accidents experienced by motorcyclists who rode between lanes compared to those who did not. The risk of fatality dropped 60%. Our bill narrowly focuses on exactly the circumstances where these safety benefits were maximized: slow-moving traffic. Some people say you can get out of the way if you see that you're in danger. Unfortunately, this is not practical. Few riders can react swiftly enough to do that. Those who do still receive traffic citations. I refer you to the written testimony of Nicholas Moki on Senate Bill 574 in 2021, who did receive a citation for dodging his bike between lanes when he felt his life was in danger. The legislature has heard from over 1,000 riders testifying in support of this bill. Republican and Democrat sponsors from all over the state, urban and rural. I'd also like to refer you to the written testimony of retired Klamath County Sheriff Tim Evinger. Tim has over 24 years of law enforcement experience and explains very clearly that these rules can be policed. With respect to training, riders in the state are already trained to locate safe escape routes in traffic and proactively navigate into them. This bill is entirely consistent with that training. For more on this, I refer you to the written testimony of Brian Edwards, a retired Oregon motorcycle safety instructor. For your convenience, my written testimony in OLIS summarizes all that I have just said and provides links to the testimony I referenced. Thank you very much.
Yeah, my name is Nicholas Harris. I'm the Western States representative for the American Motorcyclist Association. I believe I've testified in front of this committee committee in the past. I'm trying to bring a slightly different perspective. I lived in California for the last 20 years and recently relocated to Seattle, so I was very involved in the California efforts when we kind of formalized this practice. I've also been working with folks in Arizona who legalized it in 2022, in Utah in 2019, and also in Montana in 2021. So I both worked on it from the legislative side as well as I've been a rider for about 30 years now, so I've spent a lot of time in traffic. And just to point out, I mean, the average rider is not going to split next to a semi. You're going to look at the conditions, you're going to decide what's best for you. And there's plenty of riders, even in California to this day, where this has been a very common practice that just simply don't split. I've passed plenty of riders that just choose not to do it, or that day the conditions don't look right, and so they don't do it. So I always like to point out this is not a mandatory thing. This is another option for riders that are comfortable. As was referred to by Jonas, the key factor in the UC Berkeley study was the speed delta. So keeping the speed of the surrounding traffic and the motorcyclist within a reasonable, what he referred to as the delta as 15 miles per hour or less, is what he identified as no increase in injuries or increase in injury outcomes as far as severity of injury. AMA believes that Senate Bill 422 is a perfect opportunity to bring this to Oregon. It's a lot more conservative than was identified in the study. It's very similar to what we're seeing in other states. And just to go quickly over the list of states currently considering this, we have 8 states: Washington, Missouri, Texas, Colorado, Tennessee, Virginia, New Jersey, and Massachusetts are all considering similar legislation this session. Thank you for your time.
Chair Brzezinski and members of the committee, my name is Tara Svensson. I'm from Wilsonville, Oregon, and I'd like to tell you why I support SB 422 and why this bill is important to me as a veteran, as a mother, and a writer. Growing up, I was an Army brat. I had no roots and no friends until I moved here to Oregon and I graduated high school. My dad wanted a son, but he got me instead. And he raised me like a soldier. When my 2 brothers were born, my dad didn't need a son anymore, and he wanted me to be that stereotypical female: quiet, demure, and proper. Well, I rejected all of that and what society wanted me to be as a female, and it was me, and not my brothers, that decided to serve. In the Army, I learned how to push beyond my mental and physical limitations. I was really put to the test when I deployed to Iraq for Operation Iraqi Freedom. While there, I met my husband when he saved my life when our convoy was ambushed. Our daughter, Cadence, was born in 2007. She's a Wilsonville High School student, here in this audience as well. And nothing in this world is more important to me than my daughter. I have raised Cadence as a single mother since she was 2, working full-time, putting myself through school. Today, I'm proud to be working as a paralegal for a law firm in downtown Portland. To me, writing means freedom and brings a fulfilling sense of oneness with the world around me. I get to share my love of motorcycles with my daughter. And when we ride together, it's a bond that we get to share. I ride my motorcycle to work, which is about a 30 to 60 commute each way. One of the most dangerous situations I face as a rider is stop-and-go traffic because I don't get a legal exit strategy. When I ride, I have to be constantly vigilant, aware of my environment, identify threats, and formulate exit strategies. I ride as though I am invisible to drivers around me because they are the threat I cannot control. In a way, riding motorcycles is very much like being in the Army. We train, we practice, and we wear proper gear so we can get home safely to our families. The one thing more important than me getting home safely is making sure my daughter gets home safely when she's riding with me. That is my mission. I'm close to being done. May I continue? Thank you. There is a special bond amongst veterans and a sense of community which is unique. I have found there is a similar bond within the riding community. Nobody cares more about riders than other riders. I am new to the riding community, and I will never forget attending the Motorcycle Awareness Rally, which occurs right here at the Capitol. Every fallen rider is honored with a white helmet, and every name is read out loud. I've had to bury friends that I deployed with, and my grandfather is buried in the San Francisco National Cemetery. White tombstones, white helmets. Nobody in this room wants to see these. Passing this bill will give me the exit strategy I need to complete my mission. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this testimony is just a perfect example of this. This woman being in the military, very used to like regulations and following the rules and chain of command and all that, never breaking things. This is the person that I fear for when dangerous things happen, because you're just as skilled as you can get. You'll just never be as skilled as you can be when you start viewing the road as a more open path. Like you start looking at lanes and lines as everything is just guidance. It is not law. It is not rules. It is just a guidance. These legislators who think that motorcycles are just going to sit in traffic with high heat or cold or wet, this is delusion. Everybody I know who's like me and started splitting in a place that's illegal, it was because they just got fucking fed up.
Senator Brzezinski, members of the committee, my name is Christopher Slater. I'm an attorney and a writer. I think I've met or spoken with all of you and been before this committee. I think this is my 5th time. This bill has been going on for 8 years. I'm going to be very quick. I just want to address the proposed -1 amendment. As a writer, I have concerns about the -1 amendment. I'm just going to be clear. It elevates a lane violation from a Class B violation to a Class A violation, which is the highest violation there is in the state of Oregon. The maximum fine for a class violation is $2,000. When I looked up at similar violations that are Class A's, I think the clearest example that we can compare is careless driving contributing to an accident. That's a Class A. And so as a writer, I have a hard time, just to be honest, accepting that a rider going 30 miles an hour in a traffic situation where, say, traffic is going 20 and they are lane filtering, so they're exceeding the parameters of this bill, would be subject to the same punitive measures as a careless driver that collides with another vehicle and even causes an injury to one of those occupants. Now, as an attorney, I have to say I also have another concern, which is I have a concern that this could lead to a presumption of civil liability if a rider is lane filtering at speeds that exceed the parameters of this bill. However, I took some time and looked at a similar bill solution, which was the 65 mile per hour speed limit bill in the state of Oregon. And so in that bill, it elevated a violation. So if you're going 75 and a 65, it's the same penalty as going 75 and a 55. So, and just the other note I wanted to make, as a lawyer, I've been working on this bill for 8 years. This kind of solution never occurred to me. So I think we would need definitely to get the word out, and I'll just finish up, word out to the writing community so that they are aware of the stiff penalties that will apply if this -1 amendment is accepted, so that the writing community understands that these parameters are going to be strictly enforced by law enforcement. And I refer you to Tim Evinger, the Klamath County Sheriff that was previously mentioned. He addresses the -1 in his testimony. I'm available if anyone has any legal questions. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. The people who create our laws don't want to trust you. They don't want you to use your judgment. They want you to comply, not think. This amendment they made to make it a $2,000 infraction for splitting over is absolutely insane. So insanely unethical to be punishing riders for stuff that is just so benign that you can find countries that have been doing it the entire time motorcycles have existed. France, Germany, the Netherlands, like these are Japan. These are normal places that are working just fine. And then yet in fucking America, you go 5 miles an hour over and we're going to fucking ticket you up $2,000, put you in the fucking, how many people can even afford that? You know, I'm going to be honest, I'm afraid for that. I'm afraid for people to be popped with it, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Chair Brzezinski, thank you.
You bet.
Vice Chair Thatcher, members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to provide testimony today on Senate Bill 422. My name is Joshua Wilson. I'm a sergeant with the Washington County Sheriff's Office, and I'm here today on behalf of the Oregon State Sheriff's Association and Oregon Association Chiefs of Police to oppose Senate Bill 422. I've served in law enforcement for over 20 years. I'm currently leading the county's interagency major crash reconstruction team and our traffic safety unit, where I spent most of my career. And I've investigated and supervised many crashes that involve seriously injured or killed motorcyclists who typically have the least amount of protection on the road. And I firmly believe that allowing lane splitting or lane filtering is only going to decrease highway safety and increase those chances of injury. A written testimony in support of this bill has repeatedly suggested that allowing lane splitting will reduce highway congestion and improve rider safety, in part by reducing the chances of rear-end collisions in heavy traffic. And I disagree with those notions for several reasons. First, our highways are simply not designed for this. Lanes are clearly marked. drivers are expecting that other drivers will have a full adjacent lane to them to pass with a safe, reasonable distance on each side, and lane filtering nearly eliminates that entire safe buffer. Second, drivers aren't expecting motorcyclists to do this. For people, especially like elderly drivers, that can be a startling event with when they're stopped in traffic and motorcyclists are going by them, even at a speed of only 10 miles an hour or more. For those who do see the rider approaching in the rear, it can create road rage situations I've personally seen when that car will intentionally move over to the lane line to close the gap and prevent the motorcycle from passing through. And even the best riders can't predict when an unsuspecting driver is going to do that or to change lanes in front of them as they try and pass between. And you heard in previous testimony that it's not practical and riders can't be expected to quickly react to those potential crashes. Yet filtering actually puts them in the most vulnerable position possible. That narrow channel between two rows of vehicles with no avenue for crash avoidance and directly in a driver's blind spot as they approach those cars from the rear. And also in times of poor visibility, like at night or with the sun shining in the rearview mirror on a summer afternoon, it can make seeing those riders coming up from the rear nearly impossible. Police, motorcycle training teaches against filtering. Not even police typically will filter lanes because of the inherent dangers in that. And that also prohibits law enforcement from being able to actively enforce that. It's occurring in a location with heavy traffic where they're going to have difficulty moving through to stop and apprehend a rider who may be violating a provision of that law.
Sergeant, I need you to wrap up, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The final point I would have is that this bill does not address fault in the event of a collision. The motorcyclists are vulnerable roadway users, which further protects them and creates enhanced penalties for other drivers. And so it's putting them, those other drivers, at an inequitable situation where they could be found at fault for something that the lane filtering motorcyclist is doing. So thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Sergeant, thank you.
Cops are the kings of making statements that they don't justify or prove because they just expect that people will take them at their word and that it must be a fact because a cop's saying it, even though cops lie literally all the time. Highways are not designed for it. What the fuck do you mean? This guy's not a traffic engineer. He's not a civil engineer. What the fuck does it mean? How can a highway not be designed for lane splitting? The lanes are plenty wide. You can absolutely do it. Cars are not the same size. Many cars are getting smaller. That's great. Some cars are getting bigger. That fucking sucks. Drivers aren't expecting riders to do this. Drivers don't expect almost anything because most drivers are just not paying that much attention. Honestly, looking at that Tesla crash where it brake checked in the middle of the highway, there was like 9 cars that immediately piled up. That was 9 drivers who were completely unprepared for an emergency situation right in front of them. That is just the reality in America. We have very low standards for drivers. Your motorcycle riders are your best drivers on the road because they have to be to survive. We are not relying on drivers to see us. We are not relying on drivers to do anything other than please fucking just drive consistently. Before you turn lanes, look and double check if there's someone right there. That's it. That's the entirety of it. The point he made about drivers getting road rage is incredibly frustrating because that is not a motorcycle problem. You are literally blaming the victims of a violent, aggressive act for that aggression. One of the worst things about riding a motorcycle, and I do feel so bad because it's true, people get triggered by motorcycles. Cops get fucking triggered and regular people get triggered. It's not always because they're breaking the law. Road rage is not rational. So there is rarely a rational reason to be doing things that put other people in danger. This is what they should be enforcing, is people who are purposefully intending to try to hurt people. Even a skilled rider can't adapt to this. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and post a couple of videos up here of unexpected things happening while I'm splitting road rage people. And you'll see that, I totally can. Because why? Cars can't just slide in between horizontally. Cars have to move forward to go a direction. So it actually gives you plenty of time to see that and go, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to brake real quick. We finally get to the real answer, which is that he thinks it's dangerous because he's not allowed to do it. Cops are trained to be afraid of everything. That is why they are popping off and shooting and killing people and harming people all the fucking time. So it is not at all surprising the cops think a very normal, basic motorcycle behavior that is done by hundreds of millions of people around the world is just insanely dangerous. The cops also ride gigantic motorcycles with really wide frames and stuff too. Probably makes it more challenging. It is probably a little harder for them to do, but that's kind of their problem, not mine. It's not like he couldn't call up the California Highway Patrol in the state just south of him and say, hey guys, how do you do this safely? And of course, because he's a cop, at the very end, he gives away the whole game again, which is that he is concerned about driver liability. He's concerned about people who are going to get scraped up or hit a motorcycle rider because they're being inattentive and then be liable for that.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chairs, and members of the committee. My name is Denny Ritter, and I'm here on behalf of the American Property Casualty Insurance Association to testify in opposition to SB 422. APCIA represents about 60% of the PNC insurers nationwide, including some domestic carriers there in Oregon. APCA member companies have seen an increase in the number of crash fatalities and serious injuries during the pandemic, and this trend does not seem to be slowing down. One of our main goals in the insurance industry is to reduce injuries on our roads, leading to a reduction in auto and motorcycle insurance losses, which obviously translates to keeping insurance premiums low for Oregon consumers. We oppose permitting lane filtering for the following 3 reasons. First, the practice introduces another potentially dangerous variable by decreasing the space between vehicles, thus reducing the margin for error. Second, permitting lane splitting seems particularly unwise when distracted driving is already a major concern on our roads, especially in traffic when drivers may engage in other tasks and pick up their mobile devices. And finally, the number of motorcycle fatalities continues to rise. According to NHTSA, motorcycles are the most hazardous form of motor vehicle transportation. In 2017, 5,172 motorists lost their lives, a number that has more than doubled since a low of 2,100 in 1997. For these reasons, we must urge opposition to SB 422, as we're concerned it will make Oregon roads less safe. Thank you for your time.
What a surprise the insurance people are against lane splitting. Lane splitting at low speeds reduces risk because it reduces fatalities. That's the metric we're shooting for, is lowered fatalities. And then, of course, they bring up keeping insurance premiums down for normal Oregonians. Fuck companies that their entire business model is designed around taking our money preemptively and then just like paying as little of it out as possible. That is just such a sick, disgusting reality that we live in. And it's so normalized to us that we're just like letting these people say it. And it's like, oh yeah, I do want my premiums to be lower. I fucking hate insurance companies. If we want low premiums, there's a lot more things we could be doing about that. Once again, bad drivers are the excuse to not allow riders to do what they need to do. It's just so pathetic. So this is the opposition we have in 2022. The arguments are, it's not safe for motorcyclists, despite the fact that we have data indicating it is just as safe from California. There are 4 states in the US now that allow lane filtering, and there's like 8 more that are attempting to legalize bills now. We'll probably have at least 1 more in another month or 2. And then hundreds of millions of people across the world are doing it all the time. Safety is just the excuse they're going to give because all they really care about is their bottom dollar, and they can't really say that. Trucking companies don't want to train or educate or hold drivers to standards. Insurance companies just don't want to pay money if they don't have to. That's it for the testimony. Good luck, Oregon. I'm rooting for you.